hope you guys all had a great week and a wonderful Halloween. And now, apparently, it's happy holidays to everybody. Because if you go into any store, they don't really care about any Thanksgiving-type holidays. They just have Christmas out, which is crazy. Don't get me wrong. I love it. It's one of my favorite times of year. It seems a little excessive, though. This week, I have the wonderful author Catherine Bakewell on the podcast as the guest, and she talks a lot about her journey through the query trenches, getting an agent, and then about her wonderful stories that she's been working on. And I think you guys will definitely love getting to know her. I unfortunately do not have a favorite book or lit chit chat this week. I'll be real with you. It was kind of a rough week, like writing wise, self-care wise, just really not feeling everything. Had a hard time just, with writing and feeling like I knew what I was doing and whether or not this is what I should do and all of that. So we're still here. Still got a podcast for you. Although I will admit I was real close to just like, I'm shutting it all down. I can't do it anymore. But my lovely husband was very much supportive and not wanting to let me just give up right away or at all. So yeah, that makes this part pretty easy. We just get to hear from Catherine, and she is a fantasy writer of YA and both middle grade. She is really big in the writing Twitter community and the Llama Squad. If you've seen them, they are a group that, critiques each other's queries and have had a lot of great success with that. She is represented by Devin Ross of New Leaf Literary and Media, who has been a guest on the podcast before, which is super fun. And go ahead and follow her. Her handle is cat, like a cat, Bakewell, exactly like it sounds. And her website is catherinebakewell.com. She is lovely, so let's go ahead and get to know her. Tell us about what you're working on and your projects that you've got.
Sure. So I am a fantasy writer. I used to just say that I was a YA fantasy writer, but I do have some middle grade fantasies as well. My stories always have some sort of element of magic and lightheartedness in it. Mm-hmm. And the novel that I queried is called The Healer of Hearts. It is a young adult fantasy novel about a girl who is dealing with her emotions, and they come out as flowers, and that kind of gets out of control. So in order to control her magic, she has to learn to control her emotions as well.
Such a good one. That's the one I beta read, and it was amazing.
Thank you.
So excited. And what about the middle grade one?
So my middle grade novel is about music magic. So kind of similar in that The Healer of Hearts is about flower magic. This is about songs that can heal people. Ooh. And it's about a 12-year-old girl instead. And it has so many music puns. I really wrote this book just kind of to be a music nerd. And my agent loved it, which is just so exciting. So
that is.
That advice that write the book of your heart, write something that you want to read, it works. I got to write this very punny, there's so many secret opera references and stuff, and I'm not the only person in the universe who likes it. So. No,
definitely not. And I'm sure there will be lots of music lovers out there who read it and they're like, oh my gosh, this is everything I wanted.
I totally hope so.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk a little bit about your journey to getting an agent, because you recently signed with Devin Ross, who is wonderful.
Yes. She is a dream agent for me, which is so excited. I'm still pinching myself. It's been a month. I'm constantly just wait a second, I have an agent. And she's so great. So I started querying a historical fiction novel in about 2015, and I spent 2 years kind of getting my battle scars in the query trenches. Yeah. And ultimately I didn't get representation for that novel, but I'm so glad for that experience because it really helped me get used to the process, helped me fail, mm-hmm. which is that is something that is okay to talk about, that everybody fails, and totally part of the process. And I think it's also important to learn to fail gracefully and to learn from it. So I totally learned about things like what the comp title is, how to write a good query, that I've been writing young adult novels, and I queried that as an adult novel, that I opened that book with the characters at age 12 and still called it a young adult novel. So many rookie mistakes that I learned about through that. And I also met a lot of important writing friends in my life because of pitch wars and lots of contests and stuff that I started while I was first seeking representation for that first novel. And so because I had that first experience, when I decided to query The Healer of Hearts, my young adult novel, I knew that I wanted a support team to help me through it. And so I put out a call on Twitter asking if anyone was going to start querying in January, and if they wanted some people to kind of like complain with and get encouragement with, because I knew what that process was like, and I know it's so important to have someone who understands.
Definitely.
Like, oh, well, I marked this as CNR, or like just all the weird eccentricities of being in the query trenches. So because of that tweet asking for some solidarity, I formed a query support group, and we are called the Llama Squad.
I love
it. And we kind of proved ourselves first in about December, because it was Pit Mad. So we all edited each other's pitches, and we boosted each other's pitches. And that was when I decided to first start putting The Healer of Hearts out there. And I was in Chicago, and I was like, you know what, let's just see what happens. I'm going to send this tweet. I've gone through these pitch contests before. Nothing ever happens from them. I'm going to send this tweet and go on with my day. And I sent the first pitch, and it blew up, and I was shocked. I had told my friends before, like, I have zero expectations for this. And then the aftermath of that was that, you know, I kind of had high expectations for myself, because I had friends who had gone viral in these contests and then instantly got agents.
Yeah.
And that was not the case for me. I got a lot of requests, but a lot of the time it was a response that was, I loved this, but it's not for me.
Right.
Which is very frustrating at times, but
of
also I kind of see it as the flip side of, I didn't do anything wrong. There's nothing I can do to help with that. So, and I believed all along that it's a matter of compatibility, and you will find the person who really advocates for you. So fast forward to June to early June. I got an offer from one of the awesome agents who had my full, and because of when you get an offer, we start what I call the offer train, the nudge train. Mm-hmm. And you nudge all of the other agents who have your query, like, even if you've considered them closed. It's very fun. You nudge everybody. And it was like 3 weeks of no sleep for me, because I was constantly like, I'm going to wake up to a rejection. I'm going to wake up to a full request. And I would like go through my house and kind of do like a Hunger Games cannon sound every time someone requested something, because it was just so exciting, constantly having news. Oh yeah, I had like a big chart in my kitchen so my parents could keep up with all these agents and stuff. So what happened with Devin was she was one of the people I nudged, and she had my full for The Healer of Hearts, and she emailed and said, hey, I really love this, however, I'm kind of afraid about the market right now, so I don't know if I'll be able to put this as your debut. And I was like, one of my dear friends is represented by Devin, mm-hmm. and I had this middle grade novel that I really loved as well, and all along I knew that I was willing for another novel to be my debut, and because I have so many stories within me, and I really want to share The Healer of Hearts at some point, but I'm totally willing to be flexible with that and share some other stories first. So I took a chance. I called it my YOLO move, and I emailed her back and said, hey, would you be willing to look at a middle grade as well, because I am willing to have a different story be my debut. And she said yes, and she read it in about a day, and then I got an email at 10:30 at night with the all caps subject line, "OMG, I just finished it." And I was like, this is a good sign. And she said, can we please have a call tomorrow? And I was so excited. And talking on the phone with her confirmed my thoughts of her as being super awesome and super passionate. And she wants to represent not just that book, but all of my books and my career. And so I made sure that with this backup title of mine, that she still was as passionate about the healer of hearts, which she is.
Yeah.
So I think just long-winded story, but the moral of that being definitely work on another project while you're querying.
Yes.
It will help your mental health immensely. Because this was the story I was writing while I was querying, because I needed to be in a different world, a different headspace. I needed to do something fun and indulgent. And then ultimately this story kind of enchanted Devin to the point where she offered rep. So
I love so many things about your journey, because I think there's some crucial things that everybody needs to learn and has to learn in their own way. But, I think how you queried that historical fiction and didn't end up getting any representation, that everybody should go through that. Querying something that you've worked on and nothing happens with it, right? You have to put it aside.
Yes.
That is super, super hard. I have done that before too, where you query and it's like, this isn't right for me. You're like, it's not right for anybody. You're like, okay, fine, I'll just put it away. And I think it's super important to keep writing as you query, even though that can seem overwhelming. It is crucial for your mental health to work on a new project, to not be overburdened by the constant or maybe not constant rejections in your email. And I think, I like that Devin gave you that opportunity, said, I like this, but I don't think this could be your debut. What else you got? Instead of just being like, sorry, no thanks, I can't sell this right now. I think that is something too that sometimes it's hard to say, maybe to yourself even, like, oh, I love this, but this won't work right now, or it won't be my debut. I've done that before. I had one story I love, and I still love, but as I queried it and kept going, I was like, do I really want this to be my debut novel? Like the first one associated with my name. And I just decided, no, there's something different out there that I want to be my debut novel. And that can be a hard moment too, to put your book baby away and be like, okay, just wait for me. I'll come back to you.
Oh yeah, definitely. And it's hard too, because your agent is there to be your business partner, and they understand the business side of publishing
for sure
a lot better than I do. And so I also kind of put my pride aside in some aspect and say, what's going to be wisest for my career. So if it's better for me to start with this middle grade, then let's do that. Because my book's not going anywhere.
No.
And there will be a market for it someday if it's not today.
So let's talk about well, you kind of already touched on this a little bit, but your approach to querying. So I love that you created that query support group. I think that's super helpful. I think that you definitely want people outside of your family or, your close friends to look at your queries, just people who don't even sometimes know what your novel is about, because then they can ask real questions. But I think we as writers, and with this great online community we have, there are certain avenues you can go down where query help is not always... You're not always going to get the right help or maybe the best help. I've seen some query critique boards and things like that just kind of spiral off into craziness.
Yeah.
So what was your approach to querying, and kind of before, maybe for that historical fiction, what you did and what you did differently the second time around that helped you?
I think in general, it's best to get a wide range of feedback, to prevent you from getting that one person who's like, well, I think your query should just be a giant synopsis of your whole book, and I am a professional and I know how it's done.
Yeah.
So you get vast perspectives, get it from people who have queried before, who have experience, or even those who are trying this for the first time. Use the internet to your advantage. Look up lots of articles. There's a lot of literary agents even who will post about how to write a good query.
Yeah.
I do think experience is a great teacher. that's why I recommend querying in small batches and querying slow.
Yes.
When people start off, I say don't send more than 10 queries and then wait and see what the response to those queries are. Because if you are getting no responses at all for your first 10, that's kind of a way to tell yourself maybe something's not working here.
For sure.
And a good chance for you to get some feedback from someone else to look over it. And if you are getting requests, that is a good sign, and it might indicate that you're doing something right. There's lots of good blog posts and stuff. I think in general it's important to, I think we hate rules as our authors. We're like, oh, I'm an individual. I don't follow rules. I'm an artist. But I think in querying, you really need to follow the rules.
Oh, you definitely need to follow
Yes.
the rules.
You may think you sound generic, and you may think that you're totally destroying your book by fitting it in this very specific formula, but you are presenting your bare bones of your book, and you are going through a very traditional channel by querying an agent, so you need to follow those rules and be respectful of the agent's time, because they will give your book a chance. You just have to, make things easy for them first.
For sure. Excuse me. I think that, we all want to be gimmicky, or like I think some people think gimmicky will be like the better way to go to catch an agent's attention, but really just like have something that they want to read, have it be a good story that's intriguing, yes. And it'll work for you.
Absolutely. And I mean, if your query is written from the perspective of your super snarky, voicey main character, that's interesting, but maybe you didn't even include the word count. Yes. And these are, pieces of information that the agent is going to need. So I think you just need to follow the rules at that very base level, and then let your novel speak for itself. But, they just want that crucial information of, is your word count appropriate? What genre is it? Do they represent that genre? Is it an age category that they represent? So don't forget to include that really basic, important information.
Definitely. And I've seen a lot more emphasis, too, on comp titles, which I think is something that people, me personally, like when I queried, long ago, before I really had done research or knew a whole bunch about the industry, I was like, comp titles, I can't think of anything, like I'm still gonna send this, but I think that shows and can, make agents wary, like, oh, they don't really know how this works, like, so I think that's important.
The rule of thumb is that no comp titles are better than bad comp titles. And for bad comp titles, I would say, don't compare yourself to Harry Potter. Don't compare yourself to Lord of the Rings. Don't say you're the next Stephen King.
Yikes.
Ideally, what I suggest is pick one comp title that is 5 years old or younger, that is in your age category and in your genre. And then the second comp title can be a wild card, is what I say. So Uprooted was one of my comp titles, because that was I kind of thought it was YA. I think it's kind of rides the line between YA and adult. But it was in fantasy, and it was recent. And I also included, Howl's Moving Castle, the movie, which is older and is a movie. But so you can choose, the Hazelwood plus Candyland, because one of those follows the rules and the other one's a wild card. Right. So as long as you pick one comp title that is recent and relevant to your book, I think you're good. I also think asking for help will help you a lot. Do some snooping on Goodreads. Ask your friends who've read your book if they have any thoughts. And also, please don't use a comp title if you've not read the comp title.
No.
If you were like, this book is a really lighthearted, happy love story, like Romeo and Juliet, I kind of, I don't know if you read the comp title all the way through.
Definitely.
So I think just be wary of that too. Don't rush in with your comp titles unless you are certain it's going to be good. And I also think you can kind of take a unique approach to comp titles, in that you can say a specific element of the book that works.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you can say the competition of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, but the tone of Jaws or something.
Oh, my goodness.
So you can get the elements that you need. You don't necessarily have to say, well, my book's only a little bit like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. You can pick elements that you need.
Yeah. I think that's definitely really good advice. And I think, too, comp titles are, I think Devin said this in her interview, but they can be a good way to catch the agent's attention, actually, if you've done a little research, maybe put in a book and have a book that works that they loved or they've worked on or something like that is a great way to do it. I think querying, is a process we all kind of just want to get through. You gotta do it, but it makes it a little bit easier. I love querying in small batches. I don't think you should query in like 50 batches of 50. That's terrifying, first of all. And if you're and then if you realize, oh wait, I made a huge error in my query, or like, oh, I want to make it different now, you can't just email them again and be like, actually, can you use this query instead,
That's exactly right.
And I think it's querying, I think, should have a lot of research behind it too,
Yes, definitely.
to find out more about the agents, because they're our friends and we want them to work with us, and it's part, you want to be able to get a feel for who they are.
Absolutely.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your writing now. So, what would you say is the hardest part of writing for you, and what the hardest part of being an author will be for you?
For me, I think the hardest part of being a writer is plotting. I just wrestled a synopsis into submission after like 5 days of it. And I sent it to my friends, and they were like, this isn't there yet. And I tried again and again and again. It's so hard to shuffle around the elements of a story to get them to work properly. I'm terrified of middles. Ugh. I hate middles so much. I'm a huge underwriter. So I'm like, I don't know what happens here. So I originally wrote my middle grade as a young adult novel, and it was done at like 50,000 words. And I'm like, I don't have anything else to say. This is all that happens in the book. Mm-hmm. And then someone read it and told me that they said this really fits better as a middle grade, and the voice is middle grade. And like, it's really a middle grade in disguise, which is also what has happened for all my other books when I'm like, this is an adult novel, and it turned out to be young adult. So again, the importance of getting feedback from other people. But I used to be a pantser, and then I kind of realized that in the way that being a published author works, it's kind of better to be a plotter. And it's better to have that structure, and it's going to be helpful for you when you're revising. So I used to be a pantser because that's how I got to know my characters, which is totally valid. And anyone who's a pantser, you are awesome, and I was one of you. There's nothing wrong with being a pantser, but I recognize the pain that comes with not having structure, and I didn't really know what a beat sheet was until like 3 years ago, and since then I have forced myself to be a plotter. So I think that there's value in writing little fanfics of your own stuff to get to know your characters, but I think having direction for your story is ultimately super helpful.
Oh, definitely.
And now that I'm seeing things from the agented point of view, which is really weird that I have an agent, I'm still so happy about that. Mm-hmm. She wants a synopsis for a book that I haven't written yet. So that is why I have become a plotter, so that I can have these projects that are ready to go, and then I can fast draft them instead of, taking my sweet time and getting to know the characters by stumbling through the story with them, and then having to write 7 different drafts of that same book until it's pretty, like I did with The Healer of Hearts.
Right.
That book took like 3 years to write because I have written so many different drafts of it. But with my middle grade, I pretty much got it right the first time, which is a miracle.
Yeah, I love it.
Also, just that came from being conscious about plotting and story and beat sheets and stuff. I was able to make a really tight plot, make it super character-driven. And so I still have a pantser heart, I think, but I am training myself to be more of a plotter. So that's the hardest thing for me as a writer. As an author, my Achilles heel is productivity guilt. Is telling myself I'm not productive enough and being upset at myself about it. Like when I decide to take a break and play Nintendo Switch, I'm constantly like, I need to be writing right now. I'm so mad that I'm not writing right now. Or even that, I'm writing instead of like having a different job that I need to be looking for. And so I'm always guilty at myself about something, but that guilt is also not helpful in the creative process. So it is something to overcome and be aware of.
I love what you said about pantsing and plotting. I was like a hardcore pantser as well. Like I wrote one book, my first book that I ever did for Nano, I wrote as a pantser. Just sat down every day, like kind of had a general idea of where, I wanted it to go, but I think I rewrote that book like 5 times. Like when you pants, it is such a great way to just dive in and be free and have fun, but you revise so much because you go back and you're like, what was I doing? It's like I was driving blind. And so then my next one was more of like a murder mystery whodunit, so I had to do more outlining and like figure all that out first and keep things straight, which now I'm kind of in the middle, plotting, have a general idea, a roadmap of where I'm going, but still allowing myself a little bit of freedom, which hopefully will make it easier in the revision process.
Oh yeah, I definitely try to allow my outline to be fairly flexible, and if I decide to change something, I also usually talk it over with a friend and make a pros and cons list to, be like, okay, well, if I move this piece of the Jenga tower, will it all come tumbling down? So yeah, I totally agree with that.
Yes, it's very, very important. And I think it's just something, too, as a writer, you grow and you progress and figure out different things that work for you. I think different stories call for different methods, too.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I think being flexible with yourself, too, and just letting yourself try new things is hard, but important.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about the flip side of that same question for you. What is the best part of being a writer and an author?
Let me think. I love being a writer because I get to be really nerdy with my friends.
Yes.
And we just get to be excited over these worlds we create and these characters we create. And I think I've been that way since like middle school. I would write Twilight fan fiction in composition notebooks, and my friends would pass it around the lunch table.
I mean, who didn't do that, though? That was like the best.
They would watch over my shoulder as I wrote, and so I've just been surrounded by people who supported me, even in my 14-year-old Twilight fan fiction days. So I am super introverted, but I really love that relationship that can come with writing when you can just get excited over stories. And I'm also super lucky because I've ended up finding that as an author with Devin, who on our call together, she was telling me about the scenes that she really loved and the characters that she was so mad at. And I love that kind of stuff when the characters become people and you just have such strong opinions about them. So that's what's so fun about all of this for me.
I think that is great. I think that's why a lot of us get into it. I just started it as like a kind of therapeutic escape of life, and I think the times when I haven't written a lot, I definitely see things like cluttering up my head too much, so I try and think about it that way. But I want to, the best part of it is for me, like right now someone's beta reading my last book I finished, and it's like the best to get her reactions real time. She's like texting me, she's like, what is going on? Like that's my favorite. Even if it's not, gonna ever get published or whatever, it's just the entertaining somebody for a short period of time and helping them escape from their life too is pretty awesome.
Absolutely.
So we already talked about you and your writing style, being a plotter, which I think is awesome. I think it's just great for everybody to know that there's a different way to do it. Because I think in school, a lot of the times, like, while you learn the foundations of writing, I think, like, when I first started to write, I very much thought you had to outline hardcore before you could even put a word on a page, And I think it's just good for, new authors and authors who've been doing it the same way for a long time to be able to be like, oh, I could change it up. I could try something different. So, let's talk a little bit about your love of writing. When did that start? I guess in school and Twilight fan fiction and all that. But how do you remember the beginnings of it?
I I started writing because my cousin was a writer. She's 10 years older than me, so I grew up really admiring her, and she was working on a novel. And so I was about 12, and so I started writing a novel as well. And then Twilight fan fiction happened, and a lot of my writing happened through middle school and high school, and I went from Twilight fan fiction to doing my own stories, and fan fiction is such a great way to learn about character and to really have fun in different worlds and just play around with writing. So it was totally my training wheels as a writer, and I'm so glad I got to do that, and I had people who were supporting me with that. And I got to do fun things like have the Cullens had a rock band, and they played with Coldplay, because that's the sort of thing I wanted to do when I was 14 for some reason. But,
oh my gosh, I love it.
But I'm really lucky I had I had that start with people who were supporting me, because that dream totally could have been crushed if I had been surrounded by the wrong people. So I'm really glad that along the way I've had people who have supported my writing. And I think it's always just something that I can't escape, because even when I'm like, I'm going to take a mental health break and not write, all I want to do the whole time is write. So like you, it helps me cope. I am an external processor, so I don't really understand my world unless I write down what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
I did a lot of poetry in high school. I haven't really done a lot since, but I kind of argue that a book is like poems back to back to back to back, but they tell a story.
Yeah.
So, but I also think of the advice that says to write the book you really want to read.
For sure.
And that's kind of what always drives my stories, like me saying I really want to read something that's nerdy and about opera, and then I wrote my middle grade about that. Or I really wanted to write something lighthearted that had to do with flower magic, and so I wrote that myself.
Lighthearted, but it has like really deep moments in it that are you're like on the edge of your seat with that one. I feel like it was lighthearted, but you're like stressed out a little bit.
Oh yeah, it's also I say this lovingly, it's a weird book, because I had some agents say things like, "This is great, can you make it darker and steamier?"
Yeah, I could see that.
Which really made me laugh, because back in the day, my mom found one of my Twilight fan fictions and told me it was, quote, too steamy.
Ooh.
So when I got that email saying it wasn't steamy enough, I was like, my mom would be so happy right now.
That is so funny. I think I love, fan fiction. I definitely wrote a lot of that, like, Twilight fan fiction, but also I am a huge Buffy lover, and so I did a lot of Buffy fan fiction. And just to even start with characters you already know and love, and figure out the craft of writing story, and storytelling is wonderful before you create your own and have to figure out what they want to do.
Absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about your revision process. How did you go about, with Healer of Hearts? Let's talk about that one, since you did a lot of revisions on that. Kind of what were the key things that you went through each time looking for?
I had a good team of critique partners, which is something I didn't have for my historical fiction novel.
Mm-hmm.
I had people read it, but they weren't writers, and they were just kind of giving me encouragement.
Right.
But having someone who's a writer and really understands the craft read your book, especially when it's a writer that you really love and respect, it's super cool. Revision-wise, I need someone to give me compliment sandwiches.
Yes.
I need to know that I'm doing okay, but I do love when someone I respect and trust is giving me feedback, like, I think this point would be made stronger if you changed this instead. So I love when people give me their reasons behind critiques, not just like, I don't like this, but instead, this will be stronger if you do this.
Right. Not just a bunch of, cut this is terrible.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm a freelance editor, so I also try to keep that in mind when I give critiques to people. And I always try to point out the things that I like, just for that exact reason of when you're scrolling through the comments in the document and you're like, okay, did I do anything right? Is any of this good?
Right.
So I got revision notes from Devin, and I had no idea what to expect. What getting revisions from an agent is like. And my process was was I read her feedback and I thought about it, and I made a big list of like which items I needed to tackle. And so like strengthen this character arc. It was more specific than that, but I'm making it general. And so I would read through the book and keep an eye out for scenes that didn't strengthen that character arc or kind of took it the wrong direction. So I usually go chronologically and read and then fix as I go. I read through my book so many times, and I also like to use the read aloud function in Word because the little robot voice will catch so many things that you don't expect.
Yes.
Especially with like weird syntax and stuff like that. I think also I'm a very visual person, so sometimes if I feel like the structure of my story is kind of wonky in some places, I will write them down on note cards and lay them out in front of me. And then sometimes I will shuffle them around to see if the order of events is better one way or another. So I think recently, with the help of a book, a recent read I had called Story Genius by Lisa Crone, really underlined something that I kind of picked up on my own, which is that at the end of the day, story is all about characters. Duh.
Yes.
And characters were always my favorite part of stories. They're the strongest part of my stories. And I realized that your plot is basically an obstacle course that you create for your characters to grow in. So my changes ultimately came about in the name of making that character development stronger and making that point come across stronger. So that's what that book Story Genius is about how when you quote-unquote plot your book, you're really planning out the character arc of your main character, and the plot only exists to help push that character into change, and also making certain that your character is the one causing that change and reacting to things and being active.
I love it. I think that's a good reminder. I love that the story is an obstacle course for your characters to grow, and I love the way that's worded. That's awesome. Never thought about it that way before, but obstacle course is correct.
Yep.
Well, that's awesome. I think revision is something that, unagented authors and really need to perfect before querying and all that, which can be hard, especially when you're doing it all on your own, and maybe the people who don't have the ability to pay for editors or don't have a really strong writing group that they can use. But I think there's a lot of great craft books, and I love asking this question just so that people who maybe are lost or stuck on revisions get some new fresh ideas of what to do.
Yeah, I also recommend being as organized as you can. And for me, that's writing chapter summaries.
Yes.
So, I'll say, well, Claire goes to the market and talks to Xavier about this in chapter 3. Mm-hmm. So that way, when I'm revising and I see the note, the conversation with Xavier about this didn't make any sense, I'll be like, where was that conversation? And then I can look at my summaries and remember this happened in chapter 3. Yes. So, and my pro tip about that is that you can very easily make a synopsis for your book if you have chapter summaries that you then squish together and cut all the fat, cut the fluff, yes. And then you've made a synopsis.
I definitely recommend that too. I have done that with every book I've revised and done chapter by chapter summaries, and that helps me too. Like how you were talking about your note cards, I'm visual as well, so I print out those pages and then kind of cut up where my chapters fall in, the 3 acts and all that to see where things are and how things are measuring. I hate synopsis writing, and so that is a good tip to be able to take what you've got in your chapter summaries and squish them together into that horrible document.
And another thing about chapter summaries is sometimes you will read back your book and are making these summaries, and you'll realize nothing happened in chapter 8.
Right.
If you can summarize it in like one sentence, like we had a conversation, then that is not ideal. Or if you're realizing looking at your chapter summaries that things are happening to your main character instead of your character causing action, that's a red flag right there. If you see lots of passive language, like Clara is taken by bad guy instead of Clara chases down bad guy. So you can have those passive moments, but really your story should be pushed forward by the character and how they react to things.
Yes, your character should not be pushed around by outside forces the whole entire book, because nobody wants to read that. Well,
absolutely.
I love it. That's a really great advice, and I love to hear other people's revision processes. My last question for you is my favorite. What is your favorite book right now? This is not your favorite book of all time by any means, just a book you've read recently that you really loved.
Definitely in nonfiction, I would say Story Genius. I think writers should definitely check that out. Be open-minded, be willing to question your current writing method. And then fiction-wise, this is one I read a while ago, but it's just totally my favorite right now. The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. I am so obsessed with that series.
Yes.
We were talking about strong characters and interesting characters, and I hate the main character. She is not someone I'd want to hang out with, but it is so engaging. I can't look away, and she's so well written. I hate her she's so well written that she's, unlikable. I totally think we need more unlikable female characters.
We definitely do.
I love that about her, but she's just a bad person, but is totally fascinating to read about. And just the world that Holly builds is so cool, and I am just it's so political, and I hate politics, but I'm just I'm so intrigued in all this court lying, and it's so fun and twisty and dramatic, and I just love it.
You love it, but you hate major parts of it.
Oh yeah, in the way I'm supposed to.
Yes,
I love the book, but it's a great sign when you have strong feelings about a book.
Oh, for sure.
I binged Wicked King in a day because it's so good, so addictive. I can't wait to find out what happens next.
I love it. I think that's when somebody has really tuned in to their character and their craft, when they can make a character like that. You want to keep reading even though you're I hate this character and I would never want to be them or be around them, but they, you keep reading.
Oh yeah, and I mean, she's so compelling, her motivations make sense, she's well written technically, but she makes choices that I wouldn't want to hang out with her in real life, so that's totally okay and totally awesome.
Yes, because you just get to read about her and then put her away after you finish.
Exactly.
Well, that is awesome. Well, Catherine, thank you so much for being on the podcast and letting us get to know you and hear from you about your journey to getting an agent, which is wonderful. As always, thank you guys for listening and for showing your support for the podcast. Make sure to rate and review this if you can, where you're listening, or share it, tell people about it. Reach out to me if you have things you want to hear about or if you want to be a guest on the podcast. 2020 is a little bit crazy for me already with the guest list, but I am always willing to talk to you and chat with you about it, and I will have something good for you next week. Thanks, guys.